Today we have the Director of Integrated Media Strategy with us. She works at a major media agency, and I'm lucky enough to call her my friend. She is one of our couple friends, and the four of us go to music festivals and concerts together because we have the same taste in music. So I really only know her in a personal context, but I'm really excited today to get to learn, along with all of you, about her story in a professional context. So, Annie.
Hello.
Welcome to Tea Time with Janice.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to talk about everything that you're working on.
I'm nervous. This is definitely my first interview, I think. I don't think I've ever talked about myself.
Well, you're about
public.
to. In public, yes. Okay, well, before we get started, I decided to go with jasmine tea today because jasmine tea is from China, just like Annie. Okay, no, that's not why I picked it. Jasmine tea is often served in China or like in Chinese culture to celebrate and honor a guest, which I feel like is really appropriate. But I didn't know this. It's really difficult and risky to infuse tea with jasmine. And I know, crazy.
Crazy.
And I feel like that is a lot like you being able to so naturally infuse your entrepreneurial spirit into your career. I know, I really went really deep
Did you
there.
just make that up?
I literally did like maybe an hour ago, but still, I'm taking credit for that.
I love it. You know what's really crazy?
What?
Is that one of my favorite perfumes that I have is a jasmine note perfume that no one I know has this perfume either.
I just think you're really good at like balancing risk with reward in your career and in your personal life. And so that's kind of the focus and the theme of the episode today.
It's tea time with Janice.
Okay, Annie. So
Yes.
You have the title Director of Integrated Media Strategy. What does that mean?
My role is essentially taking strategies from what marketing creates and what creative agencies are creating with the marketing agency and strategizing where to essentially place that media into the media landscape, right? Into publications, onto social. It's anything that you see ads essentially, but someone is selecting and strategizing on where and when people are seeing those things. And that is what a media agency really is doing.
That sounds so technical when you explain it because you think that, well, I think that when I'm just driving, I'm like, oh, there's a billboard.
Right.
Oh, I'm scrolling on TikTok. Oh, there's a video here. But you don't think about like what time or the placement of it and like if you're the target or if it was organic.
I think the way that I described it maybe made it sound very technical. And it is. Media specifically has a whole department and sector that is dedicated to the data and to reporting and to making sure that there are metrics behind it, where sometimes marketing and creative fundamentally can't be measured. And I think that's also ultimately why I ended up picking media and staying in media for longer, is because I kind of have both sides of that brain. Kind of sums it up is like, in the beginning, especially right out of high school and like right out of college, all throughout college, I went to NYU and I went to the Gallatin School. So that's an individualized studies school where you essentially create your own major. By the time I got to college, like what I really wanted to do was be in the like music space, and I wanted to work at like a CAA or like a UTA, which I interned at, all of them. And somehow I was like, maybe being a talent agent is the perfect medium for me, is wanting to care for musicians, thinking with a business lens.
Okay.
And also, you know, helping an artist through their career, like all of those elements, and still be in this like creative world.
Did you just grow up knowing that you wanted to be in entertainment?
No, I think just growing up, eventually, I always loved music. I think music was always my escape. Music was one thing that I think my parents couldn't object to because they couldn't understand it because they don't speak English. So that was like the one thing that me and my brother had full creative freedom in our house. Like we would be listening to crazy things
like
in my
what?
house. Like if you can imagine late 90s, early 2000s radio in the car with two Chinese parents driving you to school or like to Chinese Sunday school. And we would just be listening to, I don't know, like it would be hip hop, it would be Britney Spears, it would be anything, like a mix of everything.
Okay.
On Tallahassee's like top 100s, but my parents didn't understand anything, so they would be okay with it because it was just music, right?
They didn't just turn it off because they thought it was too noisy?
No.
That's what my parents would do.
No, my parents, for some reason, they didn't mind it. They didn't care.
They're growing.
Yeah,
they're
like
assimilating to U.S. culture.
I don't know what my parents also are borderline like illiterate sometimes. Like, you know what I mean? They also don't have this like.
Did they grow up from in the U.S.?
No, they grew up in China. My parents are from Fuzhou, which at the time, now it's very different, I think, because it's been, like 30 plus years for my parents. But back in the day, and when I used to visit as a child, Fuzhou was very rural. So my parents escaped in the late 80s, early 90s, just for
a better
life, more money, coming through all different ways. I think everyone came through New York because New York was the center of Chinese employment agencies. So everyone would somehow end up in New York, and then these employment agencies would give you essentially like a bus ticket to some other Chinese restaurant in some other small town in America. And you would take this bus and just appear in Georgia, in Florida, that's why there's so many Chinese restaurants all over America.
Is that how your parents started their own restaurant eventually?
Yeah. I grew up in a restaurant. Essentially, I spent every day after school, weekends at my parents' restaurant and then by the time I was like a little bit older and could like speak English properly, I was helping behind the cash register. I think at the time I had so much animosity and like anger towards my parents for being so Chinese, for needing to like help my parents so much and like being forced to be
an adult when you're a child.
Right. So for me, actually, boarding school and even like college at that point, those were the moments where I was like, okay, I'm going to craft like the life that I want.
And it makes sense because you basically could escape paying your parents' taxes and fixing the electricity and all the adult things that you just needed a break from because you were literally just a teenager.
Yeah. And yeah, so for me, it was like getting into this crazy prestigious like boarding school that was like literally accepted like 0.01% of the global population. Like people from around the world applied to this school and got accepted into. That somehow was like my freedom, was going to a boarding school.
Which I feel like is also very Asian. It's like, I'm going to go to Harvard to run away from my parents.
But I do think that a lot of Asian Americans who feel some like a bit of that, who have maybe like quote unquote tiger moms and like feel all of this pressure, and maybe just, I would say, first generation kids in general, that is why they work so hard. I think college is that escape.
How much of all of this, where you feel a sense of responsibility and have to grow up so young, is because you're the eldest?
Oh, like 99%.
Because I feel it too. I mean, I don't have to pay my parents' taxes.
No, 99%. Because I think my brother, we are only a year and a half apart. I always figured out for the two of us everything, including like teenage angst, including partying, including all of these things. It's like I stuck my toe in first, and then he like could do it.
And then you brought him into the world.
You know what I mean? It was like I
an innocent
I experimented first, and then he was like, okay, cool. And it just did, for him, it's like, it just, nothing fazed him almost, because it was like, well, Annie's been doing this.
Were you ever scared before you made a decision?
Because I've almost felt like I've had practice making decisions, and like, because when I make a decision, it's almost like I have this like super fast risk assessment.
I know.
Capability. And it's like, it's subconscious now. Like, I really see things. I'm like, how much is this worth? Like, what are the consequences? My parents have also never blamed me when things didn't go well, or if I made mistakes. Like, they really did actually allow me to make mistakes.
Even though my parents have given me leeway and have always been like, look, you do have a safety net, like, it's okay to make a mistake. But in my head, I'm like, no, if I make one mistake, then it's done forever. Like, it will lead on to the next one and then the next one, and I'm gonna accidentally ruin my own life. Like, I am terrified of making decisions because I always feel like I'm gonna make a mistake that I can't come back from.
Maybe this is like narcissism, ego, I don't know what it is, but for me, it's like, it very much is, there's no problem that I can't solve.
No, I admire this mindset.
Including, like, if I make a mistake, there's not a single mistake that I don't think I can't come back from. Like, I always think I can come back from it.
No, I need this mindset where I'm like, I could come back from it. And I think that you carry that in your career too, right?
Yeah.
Because like, you literally stayed at every company that you worked at maybe 2 years. Did the thought ever cross your mind that you maybe wouldn't make money?
No. To be honest, no.
Wow.
I think in my mind, I had been successful. Like, I'd gotten myself into boarding school, I'd gotten myself into college, like all of these elements that in my mind, like I believed that I had the tools to be successful, but I had both like street smarts and
Book smart.
I was like education smart. So book smart, that I was like, there's no way that I could fail, to be honest.
I need this mindset.
People would always tell me that I'm super confident.
Yeah.
But that's because if I'm not, and in my position, I think I would be
fucked.
Suicidal. Like, I think I would be suicidal, insecure, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there's so much pressure of making these decisions for my family and like doing these things, that if I'm not confident in those things, that it would really backfire.
How much influence then do you think your parents had in you finding your first job?
I think a lot, because I think inherently knew that if I wanted to live the way that I wanted to live my own life, whether it was personally, like, you know, being able to like go out, have the friends that I want to have, date who I want to date, live the lifestyle that I want to live, that my parents definitely are not in line with, that I would need to fund it myself. So I feel like that is what influenced me.
To go corporate?
To go corporate and eventually kind of give up this, not even give up, because I think by the time I graduated college, I realized that being a talent agent and working in music was not it. Because by the time I was interning, I was seeing people who are much older than me, people who are in their 30s, which is now me, living in Bushwick with 5 roommates and making minimum wage at talent agents and kissing ass to like men in the agencies. And it was very much a boys club still. It was not as creative as I wanted it to be, because I think that's what it was. It's like I was willing to kind of maybe give up a little bit of security if the agency and the environment and the industry was like worth it. On the flip end, I also had a lot of other friends who were studying finance and going the corporate route, and our stories were somehow the same. You know what I mean? And that's what really made me dislike the entertainment industry, like at least working for it so directly, was that how is this any different than finance?
I think it's really different when you see an industry from the outside, like entertainment, because in the movies, it's very glamorous, you know, and you have this American dream where you believe that if you just work hard enough, you're going to get to live this behind the scenes glamorous life as well. But then when you're working in the industry, it's really, really different. Why did you stay in the world and then now you're like in media strategy?
Well, I will say what changed was after I graduated, I met my now husband. And so when I graduated, I just moved to Singapore with him, and I had no job.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
I didn't know you didn't have a job.
No. So that is also the big thing, is like, I actually did the complete opposite of anything.
You're just like, fuck it.
Yeah, was that I
don't want to put up with all of this.
I got offers from like UTA and AM only. They were minimum wage offers. You know, it was like $30,000 to live in New York. I was like, okay, no.
That's not possible.
They weren't appealing. So, and at the time, my husband is older than me by a lot. He's in finance also. And I think the biggest appeal was that he actually was in Asia. So I was like, but he was in Asia, but he was working on a visa to come back to the US. So it was temporary. So that, again, it's that critical risk analysis of like, if shit hits the fan and this is a bad decision, it's not permanent and I'm not stuck there forever. So I graduated, none of the amazing opportunities really
spoke to you.
Really spoke to me. So it was very much like, I felt almost blessed to not have good offers, if that makes sense.
But Annie, he wasn't your husband then. He was just your boyfriend. So like, why were you like, yeah?
Again, so this is where my irrational, angsty elements of my personality fight with my responsibleness. It's that, and you know what's crazy is that at the time when we were together, we had only been long distance.
Wait,
from Singapore, because he was living in Singapore. So at the time, I had only known him for like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I met him junior year. Yeah, year and a half. And we were only long distance. And we would only see each other basically like spring break, winter break, summer.
This is insane. And then you were like, okay, I'm graduated and I'm going to move to Singapore without a job.
Yeah, and he met my parents on graduation day. And that's when I told my parents I was moving to Singapore.
What did they say?
They knew they couldn't stop me. They didn't say anything. That's the thing. That's the relationship. That is where our relationship was at that point, which is very different now. Like, me and my parents are really good now. Yeah. But at that time, we were very distant, like strangers, but
you were still growing up. Well, you've always been this, like, it sounds like, and I know you, really independent person, and you've always relied on yourself to make decisions and keep your life moving forward. So how did you justify the fact that you were going to move to Singapore for a man?
Going to Singapore with my husband was like kind of the first time where I really felt like I was doing genuinely something 100% for myself.
How long did you stay in Singapore for?
We were there for about 8 months. And then he got his visa, which was going back to New York.
How did you re-enter the corporate world when you moved from Singapore?
We just ultimately, Mario's dream has always been to go back to the US. This is, I think, most Europeans or Italians especially. I literally just returned to corporate life because I think I wanted to be able to apply all of the things that I learned. And I thought marketing was like something that that was a happy medium in my mind, that was maybe half creative, but also something maybe more practical, right? So I just started applying everywhere. And again, this is back in the day where I also did not know what media was and did not know what a media agency was. I was just like, okay, marketing, PR, like whatever, something with a company, something with the salary, and something that I can do like a 9 to 5, and like, you know, someone was gonna look at my resume and there was like an upward trajectory. So I applied to a bunch of random jobs, and eventually I just got an interview for my first job was a company called Mindshare, which is a part of Group M, which is a part of WPP. And WPP is like one of the world's largest like media net parent companies. It's global. It's a Fortune 500, blah, blah, blah. I did not know these things when I applied.
Did you plan for that?
No, I was going to accept whichever one gave me the highest offer. That was my only decision.
So you didn't even prioritize at this point marketing or entertainment or being creative. You prioritized reality.
Yeah. Because I think, because I had applied to kind of a very similar vein of job. It was all kind of marketing, creative agencies, like all agencies.
Oh, okay.
Because I was now no longer specifically trying to work in music anymore. I almost was like, I don't really know now. So let me just like see what it is, and whoever's willing to give me the highest, I'll just like figure it out from there. And at the time, me and my husband were not married. I didn't want to just be like the girlfriend that he pays for.
Yeah.
We were splitting. I wanted to like contribute to our rent and like groceries, even though I was definitely making minimum wage. And I think I probably gave him like a third of our rent. So I think, again, this is where my duality in my own personality comes from, because I think me being responsible and all of those elements were not natural to me necessarily. It was something that was forced and nurtured into me because of my environment, right? So I think you guys might see that I'm taking care of Mario, but he's the only person I think who can take care of me.
Wow, that really, yeah, I do. I'm shocked. But I think that that's amazing because you found somebody that allows you to be
Because I don't
you.
need him to know how to pay the bills and all of those things, because I can do all of those things, you know? And it's more some of the more like mental, emotional things that I can't do.
I think Mario, at this point in his life, he's also probably more about balance. Like, I care about my career. I want to make money, but I also want to enjoy it and relax. And like,
Yes.
so are you, but you're probably at a phase where you're also about hustling. Also, you're from New York, so I just feel like I stereotype all New Yorkers as hustlers. And like that, the two different speeds, like how does that ever...
Yes. In my own personality, I actually would like to be more like, I am laid back and more chill and more carefree and more reckless in a lot of things. But I think Mario, when I met Mario, he's me without baggage. And I think I love that. And I think it seems like we're opposites because I can control myself. In the beginning of my career, he was actually very helpful in terms of giving me advice to not be so uptight and not take things so seriously, and also kind of how to like play the game a little bit in a corporate space, and all of these things that helped me, that realizing that I did not actually need to be the best at my job, that I just needed to be likable, and I needed to, again, be able to speak to adults, because I realized that in corporate environments, especially when you are newly hired, entry-level position, I forgot how many people are terrified or don't know how to talk to older people. Because when you first graduate college, you just still think that you're a kid, and you think that, and you don't know how to connect with people who are in their 30s, in their 40s.
I think it's subconscious sometimes, but I get it.
It absolutely is.
And when people are like, oh yeah, I took my daughter to soccer practice, you're like, I don't have a child. I don't even have a plan.
Exactly. But I think subconsciously, there's a lot of people who just start freaking out and thinking that they're so above them, so different, and such a different level. And then that actually hinders you. Because when I started seeing them as genuine peers and genuine coworkers, I would get promoted earlier or ahead of everyone, because people just knew that I could handle it, and knew that I could be the one to talk to clients and could be left alone to do the job, versus being nervous that I was 22 or 23 or whatever and thinking that I was going to be like childish. So those are some of the skills that people don't recognize are so important to becoming CEO. It is always the soft skills. It is not how good you are at your job. everyone can do the job. That's what they train you for. If you can't do the bare minimum, then you would not be there, right?
Which I think is really important to emphasize, that soft skills are important, because I grew up thinking that technical skills are more important. Like,
well, that's just
how do you be an
Chinese.
yeah.
It's so much harder to teach someone soft skills of when to say things, when to play things up, when to play something down, especially when it gets to like media, marketing, like because there are elements of my job where it's like, you need to sell your ideas, convince someone to make a right decision. And there is no right or wrong answer. Obviously, maybe finance is different because it's like numbers and whatever. There probably is a right or wrong answer. But again, in a more like creative industry, there isn't a right or wrong answer, especially as you get higher too. Everything becomes more about how can you sell it to the client? How can you spin it? How do you explain trends to someone when trends, there is no like data behind trends. You don't know why something is viral. How do you explain something is viral?
How do you, Hanny? What do you say to them to convince them that this is a good idea?
Yeah, so I think this was a couple years ago, and I will use Meg Thee Stallion as an example specifically, because I think, again, she is, now she's Meg the Stallion. But I would say maybe a couple years ago, she wasn't maybe as mainstream as she was. And that is that is the space that I'm dealing in, is that I'm essentially trying to convince someone's mom or dad that Meg the Stallion is worth $1 million. And again, these numbers are not real. $1 million, and they need to activate in 24 hours, or that ad spot will get sold to someone else, and we will lose like that momentum or whatever it is. Like, I'm writing an email essay of doing as quick as research as I can of like their target audience, the demo, their audience size, like all of these things, doing some backwards math and like calculating the $1 million split between views and impressions and like all of these things to make it worth return on their investment and worth that moment.
I've never really had to think about how you can articulate that a celebrity, like what is trending, and like really.
And you have to kind of say it in like professional words
with numbers about money.
Yeah.
Like,
and then I have to go through her like discography and pull up like, so this past music video did this number in one day, and just have to like provide proof of why it's important, and then shoot that out and pray that they understand. I feel like that's kind of the definition of working in a corporate job. It's that even if it's a creative environment and creative agency, at the end of the day, when we are working in a business, everything is money oriented. And I think that's also what maybe made me stay in my position and enjoy my job a little bit more, is because I've always understood that reality, maybe, where it's like maybe working in music and maybe working in a even more creative space didn't fulfill that, where I needed a little bit of both, where I needed a little bit of more data, I needed a little bit more numbers to back up like creative thinking.
It's really interesting because once you kind of accept the reality of every job, it then becomes like you accept that you don't need to live to work. You can work and like have other hobbies and you enjoy your work, but it's not your entire life.
Yeah. I think over the years too, I also didn't let it consume me. And I always, at the back of my mind, knew that this is also paying for my life and the life that I want, and paying for my vacations and paying for the lifestyle I want. I have other friends, and even my own brother and his friends are all artists, and I think there are moments where they also are not having fun and they're struggling with their own art. They're also thinking about what they're giving up, what they're balancing for the sake of their art. There are moments where I think they would consider just an office job and be able to maybe just make art on the side. I think I also, as I've gotten promoted and now have a bigger team underneath me, I kind of always check in with people under me where I'm always like, hey, like, do you still like what you're doing? Like, do you want to change? Because I've actually realized that not a lot of people are like me, where they are crazy and like move around and see what's out there and jump around.
I will say, I think that when you're younger and your value is more in like the hard work part, the what can you offer in terms of time and energy, it's a lot easier to move. But I feel like as you get promoted and you start to build connections and have like a reputation at work and whatever, relationships at work, that becomes more difficult to leave, because then you have to start all over, and then you have to maybe build your team all over, or like inherit a team that you didn't want at a new company and lose your connections. So
no, yeah, I agree. And I feel like I just didn't have that much to lose. And especially when you're younger in these like earlier positions, you are doing the grunt work. So it's like, if I'm going to do the grunt work here or somewhere else, I'm not overseeing anyone, yet. So I was like, I might as well get paid for it and have it be somewhere else. And then at that point, I doubled my salary with one promotion. So I just hopped. And then I kept doing that every time I felt like I deserved a promotion and or needed more money.
You know what it is? I think you are your own biggest cheerleader and like champion for yourself. Versus
yeah, like
me,
I just
I'd be like,
know.
I understand that the economy is bad and you can't promote me and you don't have enough money.
I think yes, and I also think there's just, for me, there's no other way to be.
I love that.
Like, I couldn't be anything.
I love that. That makes sense. Until now, I feel like you're just at a different stage in your life where it's more about balance, and you can finally start to settle down and not be so focused on just your career.
Yeah. In my last couple of positions, like maybe like an associate director and a director, it starts to become your team. What account are you on? Then your job doesn't become the grunt work anymore. You're not really so much executional. Like, can you deal with the client and their needs? And are you willing to like deal with them on a weekend or whatever it is? And how much do they like you and your relationship with them?
Before we end, is there anything you want to add?
I think it's just never that serious, but it is serious.
That's such an Annie way to end. Well, okay, thank you again, and we'll see you next time. Bye.